Hi folks, I want to do a quick video about using dwarf varieties for bonsai. I'll explain a little bit about where dwarf varieties come from and then give a few advantages and disadvantages of using dwarf varieties for bonsai. So what is a dwarf cultivar? It is a variety of a species that grows more slowly than a species and often smaller than a species. And is often defined as one that puts on only 1 to 6 inches of annual growth per growing season. Miniatures are smaller than that. They are often defined as varieties that only put on 1 inch or less of growth per growing season. So where do dwarf cultivars come from? Sometimes from seedlings, and that's the case with this Thuja Primo variety. It was found as a seedling underneath another Thuja variety, a Smatlik. So someone found a seedling at the base of a Smatlik that was growing in an extremely compact manner. And from that one seedling, now this variety has been propagated and distributed. Some dwarf varieties come from witch's brooms, which are deformities of compact growth found on trees. And if that deformity is a genetic mutation, then it can be propagated. And that's the case with this cultivar. This is Ginkgo biloba American, which was found as a witch's broom growing on a Ginkgo biloba in the Netherlands in 1995. And sometimes it's a mix of seedling and witch's broom, and that seems to be the case with this cultivar. This is American Larch Blue Sparkler, a dwarf variety of larch, and this is described as being a seedling of a witch's broom. So I take that to mean that a witch's broom was discovered and propagated, and then that witch's broom produced a seed and seedling, and that seedling was selected by Dr. Waxman of University of Connecticut in 1985. Once a dwarf variety has been named, it can only be propagated by cutting or air layering. And this seems to be a source of confusion with some people online. So take this Makawa Yatsubusa Japanese maple. If it produced seed, which it has, and I grew a seedling from that seed, then that seedling would be genetically different than the Makawa Yatsubusa parent plant, and would therefore not be a true Makawa Yatsubusa, but would be a seedling of a Makawa Yatsubusa. And I've actually seen those for sale online. Say I wanted to produce another true Makawa Yatsubusa, then I could simply take a branch of this tree and take a cutting and root it, and the cutting would be genetically identical to the Makawa Yatsubusa parent plant. And so I would then have a new Makawa Yatsubusa individual. So what are some advantages to using dwarf varieties for bonsai? I think the biggest advantage is that dwarf varieties generally have small leaves and then shorter internodes. Internodes are the spaces between leaves. So when you have small leaves and short internodes, it allows you to create bonsai at a much smaller scale, to create a realistic depiction of a full-size tree in miniature in a smaller size. And that's why I have a lot of dwarf varieties. It's because I really like smaller bonsai. So I'd say if you're somebody who enjoys creating small bonsai, dwarf varieties are a great option for you. Another advantage for some folks is lower maintenance. So take this Ginkgo biloba American again. I'm not going to need to prune this tree much at all or at all this year because it just doesn't grow much. And for some people that is an advantage, some people that's a disadvantage. They like pruning their trees. I think this tree looks great. I love it. I'm not too upset that I'm not gonna work on it, prune it, because I think it looks great as is, and it's gonna be fairly easy for me to maintain this tree in this condition. So what are some disadvantages to using dwarf varieties as bonsai? Going back to the definition of a dwarf, which is a variety that only puts on 1 to 6 inches of growth per growing season or year, that's not too much growth. And often having a tree that grows with more vigor is advantageous in bonsai because the more it grows, the more you're able to prune and manipulate the tree and train the tree. So if you're interested in creating larger bonsai, I'd say dwarf varieties maybe aren't a good option and are really maybe unnecessary to create a great bonsai. You don't really need small leaves and short internodes when you're creating bonsai on a larger scale. So I want to talk about leaf reduction And one advantage that I gave of using dwarf varieties as bonsai is smaller leaves. But that can also be achieved with a non-dwarf variety by container culture. So I have a amber maple flame in the ground here that I've been developing as a bonsai. I'm allowing it to grow freely. All this is growth from just this year, so you can see so much growth on this non-dwarf variety. And I took a leaf from this, and so I'm going to take this leaf over to my amber maple flame, same variety, same cultivar, that I've been growing in a small pot for a few years now. And so if you hold up this leaf to a leaf on this tree, you can see a drastic difference in leaf size. And that's because container culture tends to do that to many varieties of plants. So you can achieve small leaves still with non-dwarf varieties through this method of container culture. So it's not always necessary to use dwarf varieties to get small leaves. So another possible disadvantage of using dwarf varieties for bonsai is often when you buy a dwarf variety of plant from a garden center or nursery, the dwarf variety of plant is grafted onto different rootstocks. So take this Japanese white pine kimpo, a dwarf variety of Japanese white pine. This is the dwarf variety up here. Then you can see a line here where it was grafted onto different rootstock. And the line isn't too apparent right now. I think it's a really well done graft. But sometimes with age, this difference can become more severe. So that like the bark can develop differently between the two different pine varieties. And sometimes the roots grow faster than the top, and so you get a bulge or difference in size. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with this in the future. Even though it looks great now, it could become more apparent with time. But just something to be aware of when using dwarf varieties that you purchase from garden centers. So just to wrap up, I love using dwarf varieties for bonsai, and that's mainly because I enjoy creating smaller bonsai trees. So if you're interested in creating smaller bonsai, then I highly recommend dwarf varieties. On the other hand, if you're more interested in creating larger bonsai, I don't think there's really many advantages to using dwarf cultivars, and you might be better off just using the species. Until next time, happy bonsai.